Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, February 20th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over what the offseason might look like for the Carolina Panthers. In this segment, we turn our attention over to baseball, another team to preview as the MLB season is right around the corner. Today, we dive deep into the Houston Astros. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, February 20th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the fifth segment here on our show, that having to do with the Houston Astros. The Astros come into this season after having a really disappointing end to their year. They weren't able to make it to the AL Championship, to the AL Championship Series, ALCS, for the first time in 8 seasons. They had been there for 7 straight years, a pseudo-dynasty. They hadn't won enough to really have themselves be called a dynasty, but the best in the AL, no doubt about that. They'd been there, again, 7 straight trips over to the ALCS for the Houston Astros. That streak ended last season when they went 88-73. Won their division, won the AL West, but lost in the wild card round to the Detroit Tigers, falling in a 3-game series sweep 2-0. They weren't super active in free agency. They only went out and grabbed 3 players. They signed Christian Walker, the first baseman who formerly was of the Arizona Diamondbacks, to a 3-year, $60 million deal, as well as bringing in Brendan Rodgers for the second baseman on a minor league deal, and outfielder Ben Gamel and re-signing outfielder Ben Gamel to a 1-year contract. That was all they did as far as free agency additions go. But in the trade market, they made some of the biggest moves out there. They moved off of their former closer Ryan Presley to get Juan Bello, a starting pitcher for the Cubs. They also traded Kyle Tucker, one of the best bats in baseball, in exchange for Isaac Paredes, Cam Smith, a third base prospect, and a starting pitching prospect in Hayden Wesneski. Now, Wesneski, we'll talk about a little bit later, is someone that's going to come in and play a pretty big role for them, especially early on in the season as they wait for some injuries to fix themselves out. But the really interesting thing about this trade is the 2 made pieces. They move off of Kyle Tucker, send him to the Cubs. Kyle Tucker, who just by almost every metric is a better player than Isaac Paredes. But Isaac Paredes, I think, was built for Houston's ballpark. We'll get to that in a second, but they lost a whole lot in free agency. They lost Jose Urquidy. They lose Justin Verlander. They lose Yusei Kikuchi, 3 starting pitchers. Kikuchi, who hurts a little bit because they gave up so much for him at the trade deadline last year. They lose Jason Hayward in the outfield, Hector Neris in the bullpen, as well as Kendall Graveman and Caleb Ferguson. But the real big loss is Alex Bregman, their third baseman, who signed a contract with the Boston Red Sox instead of returning to the Astros. The Astros weren't a team that didn't offer him a contract. They gave him a 6-year, $140 million contract offer. He turned that down. He got a lot more money. He got a lot more average annual value money, $40 million a year from the Red Sox. But that is a huge loss for them, which takes us back to Isaac Paredes. Isaac Paredes is the third base replacement for Alex Bregman. And both him and Alex Bregman do one thing really well. They pull the ball like nobody's business. Isaac Paredes does not hit the ball hard. But what he does do is he hits the ball in the air, and he hits it just far enough into left field for him to be an issue at Tropicana Field, and most importantly for the Astros, in Houston. He goes in there, and the Houston Astros have the shortest left field wall in the entire major leagues. What Isaac Paredes does is he hits soft fly balls that just barely clear the wall. He is a guy that is going to come in and be an absolute machine for them. He's going to hit a lot more home runs than he should, and they're going to be those reverse unicorn home runs, the home runs that only happen in the single ballpark he's in. That is what his bread and butter is, and that's what he has thrived on. He is the perfect hitter for Minute Maid Park in Houston. That's exactly what they needed. Now, they did lose a lot. So let's look at the lineup that we have. Jose Altuve, who's tried out in left field based on the roster that they have, still listed at second base as on the fan graph the projected lineup, is looking to lead off. Isaac Paredes, third baseman at second. Yordan Alvarez, one of the best pure hitters in baseball, hitting third. You've got Christian Walker hitting fourth at first base. Yanier Diaz, their catcher, hitting fifth. Jeremy Pena, the World Series MVP, at hitting sixth. You have right fielder Chas McCormick hitting seventh. Left fielder Ben Gamel, eighth, / Brendan Rodgers, who's the second baseman. If they put Brendan Rodgers in there, maybe we see a little bit of Jose Altuve in left field. Jake Myers at center, routing out the lineup at the 9 hole. Now, this lineup isn't as star-studded up and down 1 through 9 as some of these other Houston Astros lineups have been, but Jose Altuve, Paredes, Alvarez, Walker, that is a deadly 1 to 4. You also have some pretty solid bats at the bottom half. Pena, McCormick, Yanier Diaz, all have had pretty solid seasons. They're not going to have that huge pop, but they've got pretty good bats, and that is not a lineup that you want to take lightly. The projected rotation is where the issues start to come in. We listed all the starting pitchers that they lost this offseason. Jose Urquidy, Justin Verlander, Yusei Kikuchi, 3 guys that would have been a part of their starting rotation if they had stayed on. Now you look at the projected rotation on opening day. You've got Framber Valdez as your 1, Hunter Brown at 2, Ronel Blanco at 3, Spencer Arrighetti at 4, and Hayden Wesneski at 5. Now, that might not sound like the greatest lineup, the greatest rotation, because it isn't. They have 3 guys on injured reserve that should come back soon. Luis Garcia has come in and pitched huge innings for them. So has Lance McCullers Jr. and Christian Javier. If they're able to get those 3 back, those 3 have various different levels of injuries, have had their surgeries done at various different timetables. This team automatically looks a little bit better. But when you look at the starting 5 right now, Wesneski and Arrighetti at the bottom, Ronel Blanco, who threw a no-hitter last season, but he's not a guy that really had great numbers outside of an outing or 2. Hunter Brown and Framber Valdez are good, but they're not guys you want to rely on as your 1-2 punch. This is a rotation that could get them in trouble. When we take a look at the bullpen, you have one of the best closers in the game in Josh Hader. A really good setup man in Brian Abreu for the 8th inning, Taylor Scott for the 7th inning, and then a solid bullpen when you're looking at the middle relievers. Brian King, Caleb Ward, Forrest Whitley, guys like that down the line. This is a bullpen that isn't going to be as dominant as it was supposed to be last season. Now, it wasn't a perfect bullpen last season. In fact, Josh Hader didn't have his great year. Neither did Ryan Presley. Ryan Presley moved out of there, but that was a deadly 1-2 punch right there if those 2 had returned to form. The over-under for this team is currently set at 86.5 wins. Now, last season, they ended up winning 88 games. They only played 161 because they had already clinched their division. But I think this team has gotten a little worse. They just lost so much. I really do like the addition of Isaac Paredes, but losing a guy, a bat like Kyle Tucker is really going to hurt this team. Losing a bat like Alex Bregman is really going to hurt this team, and especially when it comes down to the starting pitching. These guys just have really struggled to stay healthy for the long time with the Houston Astros, and I have trouble thinking that they're going to be able to get magically healthy and stay healthy all season long. So because of that, I have the Astros missing the playoffs this season, actually finishing at 84 and 78. But let me know what you think. What do you think the Houston Astros are going to do? Anthony asked, does Houston have enough in their system to trade for Sandy Alcantara? I mean, I don't know if they do. I don't think they do. I also don't think that they would. They gave up a lot for Yusei Kikuchi. They gave up a lot of their top prospects for Kikuchi last trade deadline. They don't really have the firepower to trade for what it would take for a former Cy Young winner in Alcantara. But this is a move that if the Marlins were truly trying to offload him, they could probably get a lot for him from some other team. I just don't think the Astros really have it in them, and they have the three guys on the injured list that will come back, and I don't think it would be a great investment for them to go get him. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens with the Houston Astros down the stretch. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Before we go, we have a score update for the Four Nations final. Canada struck first, up 1-0 after a Nathan McKinnon goal. As it stands right now, that's where the score is at 4:31 to go in the first period. We will be back tomorrow covering whatever happens during the rest of this game, as well as everything else from around the world of sports. I can't wait to see you guys then. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to